Okay, this is October 26, 2010, and I had one of those epiphanies on the Dramatica theory today, earlier this morning, then I forgot it in the middle part of the day, and thanks to Teresa's help, I have spent the last hour or so trying to recall it, and actually eventually not only got that epiphany back, that's kind of the unified field theory of Dramatica, but also a deeper understanding of what it is and how it works. Much work can be done from here, but I want to share it so I don't forget it just on the this recording here so we don't lose the material. Basically, this is it. Believe it or not, that's the unified field theory of Dramatica. Here's what it means. In the past, we knew we had these four different items for Dramatica. We had the quad, which a position means something. There's K, T, A, D. It's the same as knowledge, thought, ability, and desire. It's equal to mass, energy, space, and time. They have the same relationships among them because every single position, every quadrant of that quad has a different kind of meaning, a different kind of element will fall into it. In this area you will find the constants that later are going to be used in equations. You'll find the elements that make up the essential nature of the components you're dealing with. The equivalent of looking at all of this is like looking at mass, because it's looking at the discrete particles that are involved. It makes it the K quad of a quad of things that have to do with quads. So in here, this is our first look at the quad, number one, and we can see it as our components, our elements, the nature of things, the mass of things. And then we move on to the second one. This is the one that generates the breakdown that falls into a hierarchy. It creates a fractal image of almost a crystalline form, a fractal form of our view of the mind, mental relativity, the story mind. And it starts out with one item at the top and breaks it into four, and then into groups of four, and then all the way down into four groups of 16, which are each four groups of four, all the way down to the bottom. And it does this for four towers. This is just an indicative illustration to indicate that this view of the quad, which is actually for these towers, I didn't want to bother drawing all of them, is the second form, and the equivalent of A, ability, or space. Space because it moves from just looking at the elements by themselves and identifying them as in a periodic table of elements, and instead looks at them positionally and says, where do they fall? How do they relate to one another? And just like over here, if you take this and you make another quad within this system, then this is going to be next to it the A quad. This is going to be down here the T quad, and over here the D quad. There's no P quad. It has nothing to do with Moby Dick. Maybe Moby Dramatica or a Mobius strip. Anyway, stay on target, I'm told. Okay, so when you have that quad over here, this is the K of Ks right there, and up here would be the A of As, and down here would be the T of T's, and then in the lower left-hand corner the D of D's, because this is the D quad, the T quad, the A quad, and the K quad. And so that is looking only at them in terms of elements, but when you actually look at the entire breakdown as it splits spatially down from above, you end up with this, and that's where you see wheels within wheels. That's where you see potential, resistance, current, and power is chartable in that particular view. Now, over here in the third area, this is the T quad of things we do with our major approach to the quad. Starting from the quad, it iterates from here to a spatial view that breaks down like that, and over here, then we get into the actual equations. Instead of talking about the elements, K, T, A, D, we come up with equations such as K equals K divided by T equals AD, meaning that when K and T are seen separately, and thought is basically breaking up pieces of knowledge or rearranging knowledge, then that has to be balanced in the mind with desirability, AD, because we will only put our logic towards those things that are desirable, in a nutshell, and I've talked about that in detail elsewhere. But as you can see here, the KTAD over here becomes KTAD, and down here becomes KTAD, with T in the driver's seat or T in the K position. It's an iteration, because as the processes of the mind work, they iterate not only in terms of putting different values into the variables of the equation, which would be just this equation here with k having a different value, a having a different value, but it actually changes the position in which k and a are, so that t functions as k. In other words, we're looking at t as an element. Here we're looking at thought as an element, not knowledge as an element. Here we're looking at things that are ability as an element. Here we're looking at things that are desire as an element. In other words, when we look at desire at an elemental level, we'd be using an equation like this, which would be d over a equals tk. Okay? And the order of t and k, or order here of ad, is important because the processes of the mind are applied and the observation changes as the observer is looking at the item. Therefore, which process comes first depends on which one will be more accurate a reading, and we have to ultimately go through all different orders of these in order to see it from all sides and all preferences as to which one comes first to get the most accurate view, and that's what creates, again, this entire chart is all the iterations here. The last iteration, after it goes through all 4 towers, is to go up 4 levels back to the top. So that brings us sort of back where we started, except we have this D quad, the one that's always sort of out of left field. Anything that's going to be in the lower left in the elements is going to be out of left field. Everything in the lower left of any position, or any quad in the lower left of quads, anything like that, or that quad there, that's all going to be coming out of left field, because when we move through the mind, we're actually moving through and coming full spiral, not full circle, and we end up above where we were. But for the first 3 items, we try to group them, and so they seem like they're on the same level, even though there's a slow rise. But by the time we get over to the end, there's just too much difference, and we throw it all into the last one, and that's why it looks like it's way out of the way, where the first 3 appear to be more like an even family, like knowledge, ability, and thought. But desire, what's that doing there? Mass and energy and space, but time, that's the weird sister out there. So that's the way that works in terms of the spiraling up to the top, is that you end up with this differential that occurs, and that's sort of what drives that feeling of being out of left field. Finally, we come to the last quad, the D quad, as I said, the one that's really out of left field because of that spiral effect. And this is called the op quad, or operations quad, because in the Dramatica story engine, and in fact in the model of mental relativity, we not only have this fixed structure, but things can flip and rotate. Any 2 items in a quad can flip in that direction, or they can flip in that direction, meaning that this could change positions with that, or this could change positions with that, leaving these identical. That could flip with this, or this could flip with that, and it'll only do one on any given quad, flip one way, or flip the other way. And when it does that, it breaks the equation to things that you've not seen before. For example, it could be k divided by d, or knowledge divided by desire. These things are out of kilter in a symmetrical system. This represents a mind at rest. When you have this kind of effect, which is applied to it, it creates a mind that has outside forces of the universe, just through the experience of living, sensory perception, things that affect us physically, or a change in biochemistry, can put the mind out of kilter, in which case the equations are becoming dysfunctional in their accurate mode and are functioning in inaccurate mode, and that degree of inaccuracy and where it is can tell you everything about the forces that act upon it. But instead of having just flips, we also have rotates. Any quad can rotate 90 degrees this way or 90 degrees that way. That's because the flip is a spatial break between us and our environment, and the rotate is a temporal break, where things are not going in the order we want them, or the sequence of the process is not what we'd like it to be. Instead, it's going in a different process, and so we flip and rotate things out of the way to get them out of harm's way, flip them to get them out of harm's way, rotate them to put them in a different context, and in so doing, we hide the problem from ourselves. That's how we build up justifications to hide inequities, as opposed to resolving problems, which is to get things back to a straight set where we are content. If you were completely content, you would have no motivation whatsoever, but the mind is never completely content because there's always something acting on it. Only in stories do we reach a point in which everything is balanced at the end by a decision having been made, either properly or improperly. If it's a proper decision that's made, a correct one, then everything comes back into balance and there's no more wind-ups involved. So this is applied to the structure that winds it up like a clock, then it unwinds linearly through time, sequential time, over the course of the story. That linear wind is actually something that you can follow right here where, for example, on this quad, you would go 1, 2, 3, 4 is a sequence. In addition to having a potential resistance, a current, and a power, you have a 1, 2, 3, 4. But when you do it, the order is going to be different from quad to quad. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then to the second quad, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then to the third quad, 1, 2, 3, 4, fourth quad, 1, 2, 3, 4, then to the next quad of quads, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you have spirals within spirals. From the top down, it looks like wheels within wheels, looking at it from the spatial view. But looking at it from the temporal view, it looks like spirals going around and nesting within each other, processes within processes, as it were. So all of this would be magical enough if it wasn't for the fact that every item in here, KTAD, or whatever semantic term you put in there, actually represents a process of the mind seen as an object. That process is seen as an object as an object-oriented computer programming, where you take the process and treat it as a module, and those modules go together to build larger processes, which this whole thing is all about. So these tiny processes, these aren't just items, they aren't just elements, they aren't just the items that you have in your ultimately in your equation, but they are also processes in their own right, but below our ability to see them while we're looking at the overall processes of the mind. We have to look at these as objectified processes, modules from which we work. So, all in all, when we finally put it all together, we end up with fractals over here, we end up with order, we end up with space, we end up with position being determined in the ability quad of the story mind. And over here, we end up with processes. We end up with energy. It's the energy group. It is the iterations and the variables of the equations here. And then finally in the D quad, we have chaos as opposed to order. We have time as opposed to space. We're looking at fractals instead of fractals. Fractals are the spatial record left by the interaction of order and chaos, and fractals are the temporal record left behind by the interaction of order and chaos, a phrase we had to coin in order to describe what was going on here. This deals with sequence as opposed to this dealing with position. So we can see that they have space, order, fractals, position, chaos, time, fractals, and sequence. Over here we have the elements, the mass, the nature of the items. Here we have the variables, instead of the constants, we have the processes, the energy, and the iterations of the equations. We'd never before seen that it actually created its own quad. That was invisible to us. Now this is the quad for a K-based system. So not only do we have the smaller processes that are object-oriented that make up each quad in terms of its semantic name, like hope or logic or proaction. Each one of those is a process, the mental understanding of these items. But above it also, this is just a K-based system, and in fact there are 4 different, 1, 2, 3, 4 different maps like this of different kinds of mindsets. Each one is the same mindset, but looked at through a different perspective. And different personalities have different perspectives. The 4 basic personalities are a K personality, T personality, A personality, D personality. And these items in here are how the story mind would appear to a K-based personality. For a T-based personality, it will make a lot more sense, or be at least more intuitive down here in the K position. There we go. Down here in the T position, you'd have a T-based personality would see it. Up here, an A-based personality would see it. And then down at the other end here would be a desire-based personality would see it there. So that's exactly how all 4 of these operations. We've used them in the story engine, we've applied them, but we never saw that they made up a quad, and in fact, collectively, they describe the whole heart of the matter, and just below it, the actual processes seen as objects, and just above it, the different filters of the mind from KTAD in looking at the entire operation of the story mind as described by a quad model. That's it for tonight. I think that's everything I have to remember. Hopefully it makes sense in the morning.